Breaking down Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. The Hidden Truth About Fear and Freedom, Chapter 1. The Man Who Talked with the Devil. You know, when I first picked up Outwitting the Devil, I didn't expect it to hit this deep. Napoleon Hill wrote it back in 1938, but it wasn't even published until decades later, and honestly, it makes sense why. This book isn't your usual positive thinking talk. It's raw, it's uncomfortable. It's like having a conversation with your own fears and realizing most of the limits you live with are built by you. Hill starts by describing one of the hardest periods of his life, completely broke, confused, and defeated after years of chasing success. He had written Think and Grow Rich, but still found himself mentally stuck. And that's what I think makes this book powerful. It's not theory. It's a man who had made it, only to realize he still wasn't free. So in this chapter, Hill describes a mental experience, or let's say an interview, with the devil himself. Whether you believe it was real or symbolic doesn't matter. The point is, this devil represents the voice of fear, doubt, and temptation that lives inside all of us. The conversation becomes this deep psychological battle between discipline and distraction, purpose and drifting. Hill confesses that for years he'd been a drifter, moving through life without a clear sense of direction, chasing opportunities but never mastering himself. And that's something most people can relate to today. You wake up, go to work, scroll your phone, waste time on things that don't move you forward, and you don't even realize you've handed over control of your life. That's exactly what the devil feeds on. People who drift. What I find powerful here is the realization that the devil doesn't need to destroy you. He just needs to keep you distracted, keep you uncertain, keep you chasing comfort instead of growth. Hill sets the tone by showing that the real battle for freedom isn't out there in the world. It's in your own mind. And when you think about it, that's exactly what modern life is designed for. To keep you too busy or too scared to think for yourself. Whether it's fear of failure, fear of judgment, or the craving for approval, that's the devil's playground. By the end of this chapter, Hill decides he's done being a victim. He's ready to confront that inner voice and ask the hard questions. That's the setup for everything that follows. My takeaway? Everyone has that inner devil. The trick isn't to silence it, it's to understand it. Once you expose how fear and laziness manipulate you, they lose their power. That's when you stop drifting and start steering. Chapter 2. Earthbound, the habit of drifting. This is where Napoleon Hill really starts digging into the idea of drifting. And honestly, it hits hard because it's not just about being lazy or unmotivated. It's about being directionless. Drifting is that subtle state where you're technically alive but not really living. You move through days without purpose, reacting to life instead of shaping it. And Hill calls that the devil's favorite trap. He describes how most people fall into this pattern without even realizing it. They go through school, pick a career, follow the crowd, take advice from parents or friends, but never stop to ask themselves, what do I really want? What's my purpose? That's how the devil wins. Not through big disasters, but through quiet comfort, through routine. Hill says the devil controls about 98% of people this way, keeping them drifting through fear, habit, and indecision. And when I think about that, it's not surprising. Look around. Most people are just moving through life in survival mode. They go to jobs they hate, stay in relationships that drain them, spend hours on distractions that numb them, all because drifting feels safer than confronting the truth. But Hill draws a clear line between a drifter and a non-drifter. A drifter is guided by fear. A non-drifter is guided by purpose. The difference? A non-drifter decides what they want and refuses to let anyone else dictate their path. This part really made me think about how discipline and self-awareness are the real weapons against drifting. Because the truth is, drifting doesn't feel like failure. It feels like comfort. You tell yourself, I'll start next week. I just need to feel ready, or I'll wait until the time is right. That's exactly how drifting takes over your life. One small excuse at a time. Hill's whole message here is that The devil doesn't need to stop you from succeeding. He just needs to keep you uncertain. If he can keep you hesitating, doubting, or wasting energy on meaningless things, he's already won. So the antidote? Clear purpose. Once you know exactly what you want, everything else starts to organize itself around that. Your habits change, your energy shifts, and suddenly the devil has no power. For me, this chapter is a wake-up call, not in a motivational sense, but in a brutally honest one. If you're not steering your ship, someone or something else is. That might be fear, society, a toxic partner, or just your own comfort zone. And Hill's right. Once you recognize that, drifting becomes impossible because you can't unsee it. You either take control or admit that you're choosing to drift, and that awareness alone changes everything. Chapter 3. The Devil's Trick, Fear and Control. Now this chapter gets darker and smarter. Hill dives deep into how the devil actually keeps control over people, and it all boils down to one main weapon: fear. He calls it the most powerful tool ever created to control the human mind. And honestly, he's right. The devil tells Hill outright that his favorite fears are the fear of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, and death. Basically, the fears that keep people from taking risks, from thinking for themselves, or from going after what they truly want. Think about it. Those 6 fears pretty much run the world. Most people's decisions are just reactions to them. You stay at a job you hate because you're scared of being broke. You don't speak up because you're scared of judgment. You stay in the wrong relationship because you're scared of being alone. That's the system. Fear disguised as logic. Hill exposes how fear manipulates us into trading freedom for safety. We call it being realistic, but what we're really doing is submitting. That's the devil's biggest trick, convincing people that fear is rational. And once you buy that idea, he's got you. What really stands out to me here is how Hill frames fear not as something external, but as a habit. Something that lives in your thoughts because you let it. The devil doesn't have real power. He just plants suggestions. It's you who keeps feeding them until they become your truth. That's the chilling part. Most people are enslaved by their own mind. He also talks about how organized systems, schools, religions, governments, often unknowingly spread fear. Kids are taught to obey, not to think. Adults are taught to conform, not to question. And when you grow up like that, fear becomes your comfort zone. You don't even realize you're trapped because fear feels familiar. For me, this chapter is a mental slap in the face. It forces you to ask, what fears are running my life? Because until you identify them, you can't outwit them. Hill's conversation with the devil makes one thing clear. Fear is only as strong as your faith is weak. Once you start trusting your ability to adapt, to learn, and to fight back, fear loses its leverage. By the end of this chapter, Hill exposes fear for what it really is, an illusion. It's not a wall, it's a fog. And once you walk through it, you realize there was never anything there. My takeaway? Most people don't need motivation. They need courage. Because courage kills fear faster than any positive quote ever will. Chapter 4, The Hypnotic Rhythm, The Devil's Silent Weapon. Chapter 4, The Hypnotic Rhythm, The Devil's Silent Weapon. This chapter is where Napoleon Hill reveals what might be the most dangerous trap of all. Something he calls hypnotic rhythm. And honestly, once you understand it, you start seeing it everywhere. Hill describes hypnotic rhythm as this invisible force that forms through repetition. Whatever you do, good or bad, if you repeat it long enough, it becomes automatic. Your brain locks it in like muscle memory. And that's how most people end up living on autopilot, doing the same things every day without ever questioning them. It's the devil's perfect system. Once you drift long enough, your thoughts and habits start reinforcing the drift. You become stuck in a loop, a pattern that keeps you small, predictable, and safe. And the worst part? You stop noticing it. Think about it. How many times do you say you'll change something soon? The gym, your diet, your job, that toxic relationship. But soon never comes because your habits are stronger than your intentions. That's hypnotic rhythm in action. The devil doesn't need to hold you back. Your own patterns do the job for him. Hill explains that this rhythm can work in your favor too. If you discipline yourself to think positively, act with purpose, and stay focused, that rhythm starts building momentum towards success. It's neutral energy. It just follows your lead. The problem is, most people don't lead. They drift. The devil tells Hill that once a man's habits are set, once his rhythm is fixed, it's nearly impossible to change. That's a scary thought, but it's also a challenge. Because if your habits define your destiny, then mastering your habits means mastering your life. This chapter made me reflect a lot. I realized how easy it is to underestimate small daily actions. The little things you do on autopilot, hitting snooze, scrolling for an hour, procrastinating. Those seem harmless, but they're forming your rhythm. And once that rhythm locks in, it controls you. Hill's message is simple but brutal. If you don't consciously choose your rhythm, life, or the devil, will choose it for you. And that rhythm will drag you exactly where everyone else goes. Nowhere. But there's hope. Hill says the key to breaking hypnotic rhythm is definiteness of purpose, knowing exactly what you want and moving toward it with focus. The moment you take charge of your thoughts, you start rewriting that rhythm. To me, this is one of the most powerful ideas in the entire book. It's proof that your mind is programmable, and you're the programmer. The devil might set traps, but he can't touch a man who's intentional about his direction, his discipline, and his habits. My takeaway? You don't break bad patterns with motivation. You break them with momentum. Every small, deliberate action becomes a counterattack against that hypnotic rhythm. You either feed it or you fight it. Chapter 5. The Secret of Non-Drifters, Purpose, and Self-Mastery. If the last chapter was about how we fall under the devil's control, this one is about how to break free. Hill flips the perspective. He starts describing what he calls a non-drifter, and this is where the book starts to feel like a blueprint for freedom. A non-drifter, Hill says, is a person who thinks for himself, acts with intention, and refuses to let fear or circumstance dictate his choices. It's someone who doesn't just react to life, he creates it. And if you think about it, that's the mindset every strong, grounded man needs to build. Hill's description of non-drifters feels almost like a checklist. They know what they want. They move with confidence. They make decisions quickly and change them slowly. They don't waste time on things that don't align with their goals. They're not perfect, but they're directed. One line that stuck with me is that definiteness of purpose is the foundation of success. Without it, every dream, plan, or opportunity is useless. Because if you don't know where you're going, how can you expect to get there? Hill says most people fail not because they're not capable, but because they never decided exactly what they want out of life. And that's what separates a drifter from a non-drifter. The drifter says, I'll see what happens. The non-drifter says, here's what I'm building. It's a completely different frequency. What's powerful here is that Hill doesn't talk about talent, money, or luck. He talks about mindset, discipline, focus, control over emotion. That's what scares the devil most. A man who thinks for himself. He also brings up the idea that most people are trained not to be non-drifters. Society rewards conformity, following orders, staying quiet, and avoiding risks. So the few who actually choose to think independently instantly rise above the crowd. That's why Hill calls purpose the greatest armor against the devil. When I think about it in today's world, being a non-drifter means having clarity in a culture built on distraction. Everyone's chasing something, attention, validation, money, but very few know why. That's the trap. Hill pushes the idea that once you define your purpose, your whole personality begins to align around it. You start attracting people, opportunities, and energy that match your focus. You stop living by chance and start living by design. This chapter hit me because it's not about chasing success. It's about becoming unshakable. A man who's sure of his purpose is dangerous to the devil because he can't be manipulated. Fear doesn't control him. Failure doesn't define him. He's too focused on the mission. My takeaway? If you want to win in life, start by defining what you want with no hesitation, no half decisions. Once you do, every day becomes a move in that direction. That's how you stop drifting, and that's how you start dominating. Chapter 6, The Devil's Greatest Fear, Independent Thinking. This chapter dives into the one thing the devil admits he fears the most: people who think for themselves. Hill makes it crystal clear. Independent thought is the rarest and most dangerous weapon against control. And if you've ever felt like the world tries to keep you distracted, this chapter explains exactly why. Hill's conversation with the devil exposes how the entire system, schools, media, religion, even culture, is designed to keep people mentally passive. Not because they want you miserable, but because it's easier to control a man who doesn't question anything. The devil says he thrives on confusion, fear, and routine, all of which are impossible to maintain when someone develops a mind of their own. The way Hill writes this is fascinating. The devil basically confesses that he has no real power over a man who thinks. Once a person learns to analyze their emotions, question their assumptions, and choose their own values, they're free. That's when the devil loses his grip completely. And Hill doesn't mean thinking in the academic sense. He's not talking about knowing facts or memorizing things. He's talking about critical thought, that mental toughness that allows you to say, "No, that doesn't make sense," or "I'll find out for myself." When you start thinking independently, you stop reacting to the noise around you. You stop following trends, stop caring about approval, stop living for other people's validation. You become someone who builds his own path. And that's what terrifies the devil. Because once you master your own mind, no one can sell you fear anymore. Hill explains that independent thinking requires courage because it often means going against the crowd. And that's uncomfortable. People don't like being challenged. They'd rather stay in the illusion of safety. But that illusion is exactly what keeps them trapped. This chapter really made me reflect on how rare real thinking has become. Everyone's got opinions, but very few have original ones. Most people just recycle what they've heard. Hill's message is that you can't own your life if you don't own your thoughts. The devil says something chilling, that he controls the minds of people who never learn to make decisions for themselves. But once a man becomes self-directed, it's like a light turns on that the devil can't switch off. He becomes untouchable. For me, the biggest takeaway here is that freedom starts in your mind. You don't have to escape society or disappear into the woods. You just have to take back control of your thinking. Stop letting outside forces program you. Once you do that, you can't be manipulated by fear, guilt, or social pressure ever again. Hill's point is simple but powerful. The devil feeds on ignorance. But a man who questions, learns, and acts from conviction, he's unstoppable. My takeaway? Don't follow the crowd. Study it, understand it, and then do your own thing. Independent thought is rebellion in its highest form. Chapter 7, Education and the Blueprint of Control. This chapter is one of the most eye-opening ones in Outwitting the Devil, because Hill turns his focus to the education system and exposes how it often shapes people into obedient followers rather than free thinkers. It's bold, it's uncomfortable, and it still hits just as hard today. Hill argues that schools don't teach kids how to think. They teach them what to think. From an early age, people are trained to memorize, obey, and conform. You're rewarded for following rules, punished for questioning them. That conditioning creates adults who fear making mistakes, and that fear is exactly what the devil feeds on. He points out that traditional education rarely touches on the subjects that actually determine success: emotional control, self-confidence, purpose, or decision-making. Instead, we're taught formulas, dates, and theories, but not how to manage our thoughts or build our vision. So people graduate with diplomas but no direction. They know math but not mindset. Hill says the devil uses this system brilliantly. By the time people finish school, most of them are already drifting, afraid to take risks, desperate for approval, and trained to wait for instructions. The devil doesn't have to do much after that. The world does the work for him. And when you look at how modern society operates, Hill's words are almost prophetic. People chase degrees, titles, and jobs that look secure, yet end up unhappy and unfulfilled. It's not education itself that's the problem. It's miseducation. We're not taught self-mastery, courage, or creativity. We're taught compliance. What stands out to me here is how Hill defines real education. To him, it's not about collecting information. It's about learning to apply what you know to create something meaningful. It's about knowing yourself, controlling your thoughts, and building your future with intention. Real education starts the moment you stop letting others think for you. He also mentions that parents and teachers, without realizing it, often pass down fear to children. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of stepping outside the norm. It's not done out of malice, it's done out of ignorance. But those fears become the foundation of a person's entire life. Reading this made me think of how many people live their entire lives trying to make their parents proud, society proud, everyone but themselves. Hill's message cuts through that noise. Until you define success on your own terms, you'll always be living by someone else's program. By the end of this chapter, Hill makes one point clear. Education should set you free, not make you compliant. The moment you take control of your own learning, the devil loses another tool of control. My takeaway? Don't let your schooling limit your education. Learn relentlessly, question everything, and develop the skills that actually matter. Self-discipline, focus, and courage. That's how you unlearn the system's programming and build your own. Chapter 8. Religion. Fear disguised as faith. This chapter's one of the most controversial and powerful parts of Outwitting the Devil. Hill goes straight into a subject most people are too afraid to touch: religion. And he doesn't attack faith itself. What he exposes is how fear has been disguised as faith to control people's minds for generations. Hill's conversation with the devil in this chapter is intense. The devil admits that religion, when twisted, is one of his most effective tools. Why? Because instead of inspiring people to think and grow, it often teaches them to obey and fear. The devil says that when religion becomes about guilt, punishment, and blind belief, people lose their ability to question. They surrender their power, thinking they're doing the right thing. Now, Hill makes it clear that true faith, real spiritual strength, is the exact opposite. True faith empowers. It gives courage, peace, and direction. But when faith gets mixed with fear, it turns toxic. And that's when people start living to avoid hell instead of trying to create heaven on earth. What stood out to me here is how relevant this still feels. Even today, a lot of people are more afraid of breaking rules than they are passionate about living with purpose. They follow tradition, not conviction. They accept answers instead of searching for truth. And that's exactly the kind of mindset the devil loves, because it keeps people obedient. Hill isn't trying to make anyone abandon their religion. He's challenging people to own their beliefs, to make sure that their faith is built on understanding, not fear. He wants people to develop a personal connection with their values, not just inherit them from others. There's a line where Hill basically says, if your religion makes you fearful, it's not serving you, it's enslaving you. That hit me hard, because so many people carry guilt and shame that was programmed into them by someone else's version of morality, and they never question it. For me, this chapter is about spiritual independence, The freedom to think, to question, and to believe in something because you chose it, not because you were told to. That's real faith, and that's what the devil can't touch. A mind that believes with confidence, not fear. Hill also highlights how the devil uses fear of the afterlife to make people waste their current life. People obsess over sin, punishment, or what happens after death, and in doing so, they never actually live. That's the biggest tragedy. My takeaway? Don't let fear hide behind the mask of faith. Whether it's religion, spirituality, or philosophy, it should make you stronger, freer, and more alive. Anything that chains you through guilt or fear isn't faith, it's manipulation. By the end of this chapter, Hill makes it clear the devil can't control a man whose faith is rooted in courage and understanding, because that kind of belief doesn't follow. It leads. Chapter 9. Self-discipline, the master key to freedom. If Outwitting the Devil had one central theme, this chapter is it. Hill calls self-discipline the master key, the single quality that separates people who control their lives from those who are controlled by the devil. And he's right. Everything, success, peace, freedom, starts and ends with discipline. Hill makes the point that the devil doesn't have to tempt or trick disciplined people. They're simply immune. A person who can control their thoughts, emotions, and habits is untouchable because no outside influence can pull them off course. That's why the devil attacks discipline more than anything else. He uses comfort, distraction, and doubt to destroy it. Hill defines self-discipline as control over one's own mind. It's not about forcing yourself to work 20 hours a day. It's about mastering your impulses, managing your focus, and refusing to be ruled by emotion. That's what separates the strong from the weak. When Hill describes undisciplined people, you can see how it connects to drifting. They eat whatever they want, spend impulsively, say yes to everything, and react to emotions without thinking. That's how they lose control of their direction, one small compromise at a time. What hit me hardest is how Hill ties discipline to freedom. Most people think discipline feels restrictive, like a cage. But Hill flips that idea completely. He says discipline is freedom, because when you control yourself, you stop being controlled by everything else. Fear, money, opinions, emotions. Discipline gives you power over chaos. He also breaks down the importance of disciplining your thoughts. The moment you stop letting negative or fearful thoughts dominate your mind, your whole reality shifts. The devil can't work with a clear, focused mind. He needs confusion and doubt. That's why controlling your thinking is the highest form of strength. To me, this chapter feels like a reminder that real strength is quiet. It's not about showing off willpower. It's about consistency. It's about doing what needs to be done even when no one's watching. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you train your mind to trust you. And that's how discipline becomes natural. It turns into your rhythm. Hill also warns that most people fail because they confuse motivation with discipline. Motivation is temporary. It depends on how you feel. Discipline doesn't care about feelings. It's what you do despite them. That's why the devil can't beat a disciplined man. He's stable, predictable to himself, but impossible to manipulate. My takeaway? Discipline isn't about being hard on yourself. It's about being loyal to your purpose. It's the difference between living on impulse and living with intention. When you master that, fear disappears, habits align, and your mind becomes your greatest weapon. By the end of this chapter, Hill makes one truth clear. If you can't control your own mind, someone else will. And that's exactly what the devil is counting on. Chapter 11, The Law of Hypnotic Rhythm. This is one of the most powerful chapters in Outwitting the Devil because it explains how habits, good or bad, become automatic forces that control our lives. Hill calls it the law of hypnotic rhythm, and honestly, this one hit me hard. It's the invisible momentum that builds behind every repeated action, thought, and decision we make. Once that rhythm locks in, it's tough to break, almost like the universe itself keeps replaying our behavior on loop. This is one of the most powerful chapters in Outwitting the Devil because it explains how habits, good or bad, become automatic forces that control our lives. Hill calls it the law of hypnotic rhythm, and honestly, this one hit me hard. It's the invisible momentum that builds behind every repeated action, thought, and decision we make. Once that rhythm locks in, it's tough to break, almost like the universe itself keeps replaying our behavior on loop. Hill says everything in nature moves in rhythm. The tides, the seasons, our heartbeat, our sleep cycles, it's all patterns. Human behavior works the same way. When we repeat something long enough, it falls into rhythm, and that rhythm starts running the show. That's why people end up stuck in the same situations over and over. Same kind of relationships, same level of income, same self-doubt. It's not bad luck. It's hypnotic rhythm keeping them there. The devil in the book brags about how he uses this law to trap people. He says, I get them to drift, and hypnotic rhythm does the rest. Once someone stops thinking for themselves, once they start moving through life on autopilot, their rhythm becomes their cage. They stop questioning. They stop growing. That's how mediocrity becomes permanent. Hill's insight is that the same law that enslaves you can also free you. Hypnotic rhythm doesn't care what direction it moves. It just amplifies whatever you give it. So if your routine is built on procrastination, excuses, and fear, those habits solidify until they feel unbreakable. But if you build discipline, courage, and focus into your life, the rhythm starts working in your favor. You don't have to think about being productive or confident. It just becomes who you are. Think about when you start working out again after a long break. At first, it's a fight. You need willpower just to get up and go. But after a few weeks, your body adjusts. The rhythm takes over. Missing the gym starts to feel wrong. That's the law in action. Habits creating automatic momentum. The challenge is staying conscious during that early phase when you're still breaking old patterns and building new ones. That's when most people drift back to comfort. Hill's point is, the devil loves comfort. He wants you passive, predictable, lazy, because that's how he keeps control. So how do you outwit him here? By making rhythm your ally. Be deliberate about your daily patterns. Guard your focus. Repetition isn't the enemy. It's your greatest weapon, if you point it in the right direction. In the end, hypnotic rhythm is proof that freedom isn't about luck. It's about what you do consistently. Once your rhythm is built around purpose and growth, you don't have to chase success. It starts chasing you. Chapter 12, Learning from Adversity and Defeat. This is the chapter where Napoleon Hill ties everything together, and it's probably the one that separates the dreamers from the doers. The message is simple but brutal. Adversity is not your enemy. It's your greatest teacher. Every setback, loss, or painful experience is a disguised opportunity for growth. But most people never see it that way. They react emotionally, get discouraged, and start drifting again. Hill explains that the devil's power weakens the moment a person learns to view defeat as feedback, not failure. When life knocks you down, it's not punishment, it's correction. It's life showing you where you weren't ready, where your thinking was weak, or where your habits were working against you. The strong ones take that hit, analyze it, adjust, and come back sharper. The weak ones complain, blame others, and stay stuck in a loop. Hill's own life was full of failures, bankruptcies, betrayals, and years of frustration before his books ever found success. And that's why his words here feel real. He's not preaching from theory, he's speaking from scars. He says defeat often carries the exact seed of an equal or greater benefit. But you only find that seed when you stop asking, why me? And start asking, what can I learn from this? This chapter also reminds us that adversity exposes your true mindset. When things go right, anyone can look confident. But when everything falls apart, your real character shows. If your thoughts collapse with your circumstances, then the devil wins. He's got you reacting instead of thinking. But if you stay calm, observe, and look for meaning in the struggle, that's when you start mastering yourself. The devil, in the book, admits that adversity is one of the few things he can't fully control. Because once a man decides to use hardship as fuel, he becomes unpredictable, and that scares him. Hill's point is that freedom doesn't mean living without problems. It means facing them with awareness and intention. Every problem is a chance to build mental muscle. In my view, this chapter is about responsibility. The mature kind. The kind that doesn't make excuses or expect rescue. You own your life fully. The wins, the losses, the lessons. You don't run from the pain, you dissect it. You use it to become stronger, wiser, more dangerous in a good way. By the end of the book, Hill's message is clear. The devil isn't some outside force. It's the part of us that thrives on fear, doubt, and laziness. You outwit it not through luck or charm, but by mastering your thoughts, your habits, and your rhythm. Adversity is just the final test. It's the universe asking, do you really believe in what you say you want? And your answer isn't in your words. It's in how you respond when everything gets hard. That's what separates the drifters from the driven. The ones who drift stay bitter. The ones who think, the ones who learn, they rise higher every single time. Outwitting the devil isn't really about religion or some supernatural being. It's about the battle in your own head. The devil is fear, doubt, laziness, and everything that keeps you drifting through life. Hill's message is clear. You either think for yourself, or something else will do the thinking for you. Every chapter comes back to one thing. Discipline equals freedom. Build habits that move you forward. Question everything and turn every setback into a lesson. Once your mind's under your control, no outside force can stop you. That's how you outwit the devil. By becoming the kind of person he can't influence. Straight up. Thank you for listening.